Welcome to class. It is so nice to have you in our first class. This is the first day of the semester, so I hope that you guys are ready for a fun and enlightening summer class. This is EDU 221, Children with Exceptionalities. And I wanted to just kind of give you a snapshot of what we're going to be doing and how we're going to be doing it. So I'm going to move to this side. So this is our home screen. This is where you'll start your work. Any announcements that I give you will be under announcements. And as you can see, they're all there ready for you to go through and take a peek at. Some will be released based on dates. And then, just a minute. I'm going to go back into here. Your simple syllabus. And I want you to review your syllabus. You actually have a assignment that goes over the syllabus, and hopefully this will give you all of the information that you need. But I am Kathy Twitty Willis. I am your instructor for this semester. If you need to call me, please feel free to call me at the number listed on the office phone. I do not have office hours, but I am available to talk to you directly, or you can email back and forth through the email or through the chat here in your inbox area. So the required text for this particular class is going to be here, the essentials, and then the North Carolina Foundations for Early Learning and Development. It goes on to tell you what your technical requirements are, as well as course organization. It talks about our different modules, what we're going to be going over this semester. And then there's some learning outcomes, which I hope you all will go over and will actually be able to acquire the knowledge that is here. You can go on down through. You've got assignments and projects. Please follow the guidelines for the assignments and projects. One of the things that you're going to want to do is to make sure that you review the rubrics, because your grade is based on meeting the requirements inside the rubrics. So how well you do is based on how well you meet those specific requirements. Discussion is really important. I think you've got 3 forums that you're going to be involved in discussion. Please don't just write the questions down and answer them, but put the questions in statement form so that you can gain points for those words as well. And then, of course, we have some quizzes. My grading policies are there. You want to try to make sure that your work is done, and it's done within a timely manner, and therefore the due dates. As you look at your modules go down, and the way I've got this set up is you have to do the first module to get to the second module, to get to the third module. So it's really important that you follow this as it's written. Please make sure that you get your Getting Started module done this week, your Early Childhood Student Handbook information done, and then the resource modules before you go on to child development rights, laws, and regulations. Fill out your census information for me. Send me some information on you so I can get to know you. For those of you who are not sitting in class and who are not online with me today, I am going to encourage you, and it looks like most of the class is not online, so I am going to encourage you to make sure that you review this video and answer the questions afterwards. So, as we look at how this is set up, do remember that the only dumb question is the question you don't ask. So feel free to ask whatever question you want to ask. I'd like to just tell you a little bit about myself. Again, I'm Kathy Twitty Willis. I've been in early childhood education since the early 80s. I have been a teacher all the way up to a public school teacher, to a state child care consultant, So I've done a little bit of everything, and now I'm here sharing what I know with you, and hopefully you'll be sharing some of what you know with me. So as we look at this particular text, the essentials, supporting young children with disabilities in the classroom, we are going to be going over just some basic essentials to kind of get lay of the land. And then as we meet the next 3 times, we'll be going over specific exceptionalities so that you can implement strategies within your classroom to meet the needs of these children. So in this book, it's broken down into 12 chapters. What we'll be going over today is disabilities in young children, different and alike, identifying the needs of young children, and then developmentally appropriate practice, including inclusion and universal design. As we move forward, we'll be talking about individual supports and interventions, addressing challenging behavior, and then we will go into grouping our different exceptionalities, your speech and language impairment, your autism spectrum disorder, visual and hearing impairments, physical disabilities, intellectual disabilities, ADHD, learning disabilities. So I hope that you gather lots of information that you can take into your classroom and not only give you a basic knowledge of children with exceptionalities, but also give you tools so that you can best meet the needs in your classroom. So the one thing that I want to talk to you about today to start with is that although all children are different, they are all alike. And so when you look at your children of classrooms, no matter what exceptionality they may have, no matter what special need they may have, every child in your classroom has individualized needs. So as we look at those individualized needs, you really need to establish which children or get to know your children so that you can know which children fall into the exceptional children's rules and regulations. The American Disability Act ensures equal access to all children, no matter what their disabilities are, in the area of all public life. So you can't reject a child because they have a disability, unless doing so would fundamentally change the services you provide. So if you have a child who has a healthcare need and needs a one-on-one, and you don't have that one-on-one, then you could say, I can't meet that child's needs, and here is why. But otherwise, they have a right to be in your community. And the right is the right under the law, under the IDEA law, which is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. Now, these rights were created so that every child's voice can be heard and every child's needs can be met. We have watched this progress over time. And there's a timeline that I think that you guys will get to see that talks about way back in the 1800s, how we address children with disabilities or with exceptionalities. But the thing I want you to think is I want you to change your mindset as that children are individual masterpieces. And so no matter if they have developmental delays, that your expectations are going to be based on where they're at and what needs can be met. So you're looking at motor development, you're looking at language development, you're looking at social emotional development, cognitive development. One of the best tools that you're going to have as an educator is early intervention. The more you can get a team around that child and their village, the better you can meet that child's specific needs. So as you're looking at delays, no matter what the cause, and you'll look at, as you read this text, it talks about what the developmental causes are, why they have developmental causes. But what it comes down in your classroom is that the child has the developmental delay or the child has a special need, and that you as the educator has to meet that need. So that is something that we want you to think about. Some children's needs in your classroom will be identified. They'll be there. You'll be able to know. Other children, it may not be as visual, and documentation is going to be your best friend. But looking at identifying the needs of young children with disabilities requires early access to treatment that can change the child's life. So when you look at the American with Disabilities Act, the IDEA, when you look at all of the rules and regulations that are out there, and you're going to be learning about those in your assignments coming up, remember that those are there to protect the child. And what we want to do is give you the tools to make sure that you can do the best you can for the children in your care. So, a couple of just things I want to lay out as foundational. The Individual with Disability Act, the Part B is ages 3 to 21 years old, and the Part C is ages 0 to 2. And it's a little different with those age groups because the children who are 3 to 21 years old have something called an IEP, an individual education plan. And the children who are 0 to 2 years old has the individualized family services plan. So they're a little bit different in the way that they're written up and the way that they meet the needs of the specific child and the families. Families need more support, 0 to 2. So that's why the family is involved. The family is involved with the IEP, but it's strictly what kind of accommodations can happen and what are our goals to meet this child's academic needs, 3 to 21 years of age. There are a couple of key players that should be in the process with you when you have a child who has exceptionalities. So you need a developmental pediatrician. There are therapists, whether they're speech or physical or occupational, all kinds of different therapists are out there that can help support you and the child. And I'm going to give you tips as we move forward on how to access that support from therapists who are coming into your classroom. Do note that knowing what the children in your care, knowing where they're at, knowing where they're supposed to be at from the developmental guidelines is going to be just so incredibly imperative. As you look in some of your assignments, it talks about developmental checklists and having access to those, and the resources are there to be able to say, okay, this child is not meeting these specific indicators on the developmental checklist, so therefore I am concerned there may be a challenge. So would you consider having your child looked at by a developmental pediatrician? If the child is 3 years old in your classroom, they can go straight to the school system and receive free testing through the school system. So determining eligibility for services is not going to be your responsibility, but providing these families with the correct contacts to be able to access these services of determining eligibility and identifying the child's specific needs, that's going to be a tool that you actually will be able to use. Now, some of your children will come in already having a IFSP, already having an IEP, because they've already had an evaluation. And you're going to need to obtain documentation if the family so sees fit, so that you can actually, excuse me, I do not have my phone on mute, I apologize. Okay, so that you can see where the child is at and see what accommodations need to be met within your classroom. When you're looking at a child's development, you're going to be looking at their cognitive development. You're going to be looking at communication development. You're going to be looking at the social emotional development, the adaptive development. And once you do realize that the children are not meeting the milestone checklist, then you can help the parent to understand where the child is on the present levels of functioning and what tools are out there for them to be able to gain the resources that they need in order for a referral to be made and an evaluation to be completed. So, as we look at the first and second chapters, one of the things that I'm going to just really express to you guys is that documentation is going to be the greatest tool that you can provide the families. Because when families go to the doctor, they say things like, well, my teacher said that my child's not meeting the developmental checklist. And pediatricians aren't necessarily as in tune, not all pediatricians, but most pediatricians are not in tune with what happens not just in that couple of minutes of evaluation. So you want to make sure that you indeed do give the right resources. So where do you start as an educator? Well, first of all, you need to know that about 15% of children worldwide live with some sort of disability. And so 15% of your class, at least, will have some identified or unidentified disability. And it is important that you, as an educator, know what the milestones are to be able to articulate to the parents exactly where they're not meeting those developmental milestones. One of the assignments that you're going to be doing is called Watch Me, Celebrating Milestones. It is a free online course, and you're going to be completing it and making a copy of that completion certificate and sending it to me through the portal. So that is going to be a phenomenal tool for you. So when you think about developmentally appropriate practice, inclusion, and universal design, you need to remember that teaching a young child with disabilities involves the support of many different people, as I've said. And they're not only for the child and for the family, but they're for you as well. And so it is coming together in that village mentality that is going to allow you to not only best meet the needs of the child, but best meet your needs as the educator of the child with disabilities or exceptionalities. So in looking at what developmentally appropriate practice is, you need to remember that developmentally appropriate practice is an approach to teaching based on the research on how young children develop and learn, and on what is known about effective early education. It's designed to promote young children optimal learning and optimal development, no matter where they're at on that spectrum. Remember that as an educator, it is your job to meet the children's needs where they're at. That you don't have a classroom of, all boxes that are the same size and the same shape and the same density. And you have a classroom of truly zebras. And if you know anything about zebras, you know that no one zebra has the same stripe pattern as another zebra. So just totally an individual masterpiece. So as you are meeting the children where they're at, that means you've got to get to know them. You've got to enable them to reach their goals that are both challenging and achievable as individual as each child is. You've got to not only know them, where they come from, what their culture is, but you need to know about child development and early learning. So you need to know those developmental milestones. You need to know what is individually appropriate for each child. You may have one child that something is individually appropriate with, that another child needs something totally different. And so knowing how to switch and meet individual needs is something that I hope some of the techniques that you'll learn in this class. Know what's culturally important to the family. Inclusion is something that we talk about when we talk about children with exceptionalities. And inclusion is kind of set up in a pyramid. So when you think about the pyramid, you think about the least restrictive environment for a child. So that's like a general classroom with no support services. But then when you have a child with exceptionalities, you look at, do they need a classroom that has accommodations, that you're changing the environment to meet the specific need of the child? Do they have a situation, a classroom where they need to be pulled out for OT, or they need to be pulled out for physical therapy? Do they need to be in a classroom with just exceptional children? Those are all things that are a part of that pyramid that focuses on least restrictive environments. So the goal is that you put a child in a classroom that's not as restrictive, because statistically, we have learned that children learn more. If you go back to your EDU 119 class where you learned about Vygotsky, you learned that there was that zone of proximal differences where he taught to scaffold education, where one child who knew more was sitting beside another child who knew a little bit less. And by sitting beside that child, Vygotsky's idea on scaffolding was that the other child's educational level would come up because the child that knew more was helping to teach them. And that is true. That happens every day. And I'll give you an example. You know, being a typically developing person, I, as an adult, decided that I wanted to learn how to do creative memories. And so we went into this group with a bunch of different women, and we pulled out all of our pictures and we pulled out everything. And I was able to sit and have ideas of my own. But then the person beside me was doing things, and I was like, oh, I like that. Let me add that to this. And so when I was done, I had more skills than when I went in, because I had learned from the people around me. And so that's really, really important. So there's a benefit of inclusion, of having children with exceptionalities in your classroom. It enhances social skills because it fosters interactions with diverse peers. It improves academic outcomes through tailored support through the services that you provide. And it encourages empathy and understanding among all students. Empathy is something that we have to teach our children. And so if your children know that there's a child in the classroom that may need help with this or that, and they learn to be more patient, or they learn to help provide different resources that they may need, this is going to teach all of the children, not just your children with exceptionalities, how to function in an environment where you have to adapt your behavior to best meet the people within your environment. It builds self-esteem. Children can have confidence and learn confidence that they can do it themselves, that you're not doing it for them. And it prepares children for a diverse work society and workforce. Above all, it promotes acceptance and reduces that stigma of children with exceptionalities. Being a meaningful member in society is the first step to equal opportunity, one of America's most cherished values and ideals. It is every person's right to be a part of your classroom community. And what you have to do as an educator is get the tools that you need to best serve the children in your care. When you look at NACCE, they have an amazing joint position statement with the North Carolina Early Childhood Inclusion. So if you go to page 26 in your book, their position statement says this: early childhood inclusion embodies values, policies, and practices that support the right of every infant and young child and his or her family, regardless of ability, to participate in a broad range of activities and contexts as full members of families, communities, and society. The desire results in inclusive experiences for children with or without disabilities, and their families include a sense of belonging and membership, positive social relationships and friendships, development and learning to reach their full potential. The defining features of inclusion is that can be used to identify high-quality early childhood education and services are access, participation, and supports. And that's what we hope to give you in this time together, so that you have access to the information that is within your assignments, things like working with children with disabilities, things like, let's go here, down here to 2, where you're learning the signs, watch me video. All of these things are going to help better equip you. Inclusion looks different for each child. The differences are based on the individual needs, the cultural background, the social skills, the disability types, the emotional readiness, supportive systems, those systems of family friends, of educators, of support specialists. All of this is going to help you define how inclusion is going to look for each child with exceptionalities in your classroom. There are some barriers, and we hope that this class is going to break down some of those barriers. Attitudes is a barrier. Lack of expertise is a barrier. Lack of having comprehensive services is a barrier. And limited time and commitment is a barrier. You've shown me commitment by showing up for this class. So I'm hopefully going to be able to give you, through the curriculum and through some of the resources that will be provided to you, some of the information that is going to build your expertise, that is going to give you resources for comprehensive services, that is going to change your attitude on having children with exceptionalities within your classroom. So we've got about 15 minutes left. I want to talk a little bit about universal design and what it is and how it would look within your classroom. Universal design is a way to design your classroom and your space and the routines and the activities within that classroom so that they are adaptable and can be used with many different children in a variety of ways. When you think about universal design, it was first applied to architecture. So like when we built ramps to get into the building, when we made sure that people who needed to use stairs could use stairs, but that there were ramps for other people. Those were some of the beginning ideas of universal design, making sure the bathroom was big enough for a wheelchair to get in. But when we look at universal design in the classroom, we want to think more than just structural design. We want to think about the way to design your curriculum to include many options, that your materials meet the needs of the children that you're serving, that they're flexible, that the methods and the way you go about things are flexible, so that you've got your routines and your activities that are flexible and responsive to the children's needs, which will reduce barriers within your classroom. So what are some of those indicators? Well, equitable use. So all children have the ability to use the same materials and the same spaces. So if you have a child with a wheelchair, that the easel is set up so that the wheelchair can go under it. If you have a child who is on, has braces on their legs, that you have a ramp that goes down to the outside area so that they can get out on the playground. That it's flexible use, that the space is set up so that you can arrange your furniture such that it accommodates the children within your area. That The switches on the door are, you're able to, the handle on that door where you can push it down and you don't have to turn it. When you've got books and children who have some motor skill issues, paper clips that you put on the pages so that they can move those and open those with easier access. Some of it's really simple, labeling things, putting pictures of things, putting braille ups for your children who are vision impaired, that your spaces and your materials can inform children in more than just one way. So that's the perceptual information, that you have a tolerance for error. Sometimes it's going to work, sometimes it's not. That there is low physical effort for things like hand washing, and so that you've got a paper towel dispenser in your bathroom or automatic soap. And one of the things that you're going to find you're going to need is a quiet retreat area. So they call that a cozy corner. One of the best videos I've ever seen is on Vismo or Vimo. But it is an NCRLAP video, and I'm going to put it into our chat, our information box over here in the announcements. I'm going to put it in that announcement box for you so that you can go to it, click it on, and watch it, because it talks about having that space where children can decompress, where when things get too much for them, that they can have a space to go to kind of cool down. And that's going to be important. You've got that universal design, so you want to make sure that you've got diverse materials, that you have accessibility to technology, that you have varied instruction strategies, that your room is sensory friendly, and you have collaborative learning. And so I'll be bringing some sensory friendly objects. I meant to bring one in today, but I'll be bringing some sensory friendly objects and just showing them to you in the next 4 sessions that we have, so that you can, see some things that I actually use that are beneficial. So on page 30 and 31, it talks about universal design classroom checklist. And so it has questions for you about your checklist. And I'd like you to go in and look at your physical environment and your class climate and your interactions and see where you fall in this area. And possibly make a goal for the end of the semester that would be adding different things to all 3 of these areas so that you can become more comprehensive in your education style. When you look at universal design, you've got to have physical access to your space. You've got to have social and emotional access, making sure that there's a diverse group of peers and adults with whom the children can build and form a relationship. I'm going to tell you that this is so important because I've seen it firsthand. I have a grandson who's on the spectrum, and I have many grandchildren. And when we go, in fact, we just went to the movies. I took 9 kids to the movies this weekend, and they all sat down, and 2 of my children who were with me were on the spectrum. So both of them had little squeezy balls that they could play with. And it's interesting, some of the other children were like, "Oh, Mimi, you've got to get his, calm down ball because, he needs it." And they called it something else that kids are calling it today. But they all worked together to make sure that event, that movie, met the needs of all the children and there weren't any behavior issues. So teaching children to form that emotional support service is so incredibly important. We want to make sure that you've got a good activity plan, that you've got it for all children in your classroom, because an activity plan is a map to your child's development. And so it's not a once and done kind of thing. You need to make sure that you're looking at the children in your classroom and structuring the activities to meet their specific developmental needs, no matter how wide the range. That you've got that participation, that physical participation, that language participation, that you can help children to communicate unaided as well as aided. Aided would be your augmentation or alternative devices. One of the neatest things I saw was with my son on the spectrum. His mother had a key ring that had pictures on it. And so when he had to be quiet, she'd flip the picture of the mommy going, and he would know this is the time to be quiet. Now, would he always do it? No, but it aided him and she didn't have to say it over and over, which was a beautiful thing. Schedules, making sure that schedules and routines are there in your classroom, that children know what's going to happen next, that they have that routine, because that routine is going to help them to self-regulate, to be able to control their own behaviors. And that you've got some sense of progress, where you've gotten to, where you're at on your developmental checklist, and then where you're going, and then what you accomplished. So, you know, when you think about the plan, do, and review, that's very much what you're doing with your curriculum. You plan it, you do it, and then you look at it and say, what could we have done better? So being able to monitor a child's progress is going to be so important. And you also want to monitor the child's IFSP and IEP in goals that are listed in their plans and documents. So that kind of went over everything today. I am going to talk about individualizing supports and interventions next week. And then we are going to go in 2 weeks, sorry, actually it's 3. So if you look at your calendar, it should tell you when it's gonna be in your simple syllabus. It's gonna tell you when the classes that I do are. And so if you look and see down through here, I do know it's in here. That's here we go. So it gives you the different quizzes and assignments, and then we will be looking at the calendar, which actually will give you when everything is due and then when we have class. So let's go to here. To here, this is what is due today, and your class is today. And then as we move on to June, you'll see that you have class, and it's not down here, but you're gonna have class on the 16th and the 30th, and I do not know why it's not down here, because I put it on the calendar, but I tell you what, I'll get it on the calendar today when I get home. And then, let's get here. So you're gonna have a class June the 30th. You're gonna have a class Okay, so we did May the 26th. You're gonna have a class June the 2nd, June the 16th, and June the 30th. So and I will make sure they are on the calendar, so that you can come or watch it, or you can watch it afterwards because I'll post it and then answer the questions, which will count for your attendance, which is mandatory for this class. So thank you very much. I appreciate your time and energy. You have a great class. If you have any questions, just email me or call me.